The Bengals are making roster moves like it's a Wild West. Let's break it down.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. Together, we make up the Locked On Bengals podcast, your only daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Follow us anywhere you listen to podcasts or hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Click the like, the little thumbs up if you like what we're doing. We do appreciate that, and it helps us quite a bit. Today's episode is brought to you by RunYourPool. Check them out today and get $10 off at runyourpool.com/lockedon or use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. A lot of roster moves to get to today, James, and they're all over the place. When I said Wild West in the teaser for the YouTube version of the show that I guess if you're listening to the audio only version, you don't get, I meant it because, we started the day with two waiver claims, a cornerback and an edge player. And later in the day, to make room for those guys, because of timing issues, we think the Bengals let go. They terminated the contract of Mike Thomas and waived Trent Irwin, leaving them with 5 wide receivers. And we talked about that a couple of days ago. Remember, James was like, would it be crazy for them to keep 5 wide receivers? And we both decided, yeah, that'd be a little crazy. Wasn't Stanley Morgan. It was Mike Thomas would have been the 5th guy. And instead, Mike Thomas, as of now, has been cut. But we believe that the reason for this is that they can't put players on IR to return until 4 p.m. on Wednesday. All these other moves happened before that because the waiver deadline was processed at noon and all these other moves happened. And so perhaps just a timing difference, and we'll see the short-term IRs for potentially Trey Waynes and Khaled Kareem, both of whom are on the rehab field on Wednesday. And that would make a little bit of sense. You could see Mike Thomas back with the team as soon as that happens, hypothetically, and Trent Irwin would have to clear waivers if the Bengals want to bring him back as well.
Yeah, it's a bold, headline, a crazy headline. And when it happened, you got to kind of digest it and figure it out and try to dissect it. And to me, it's pretty simple. One, if you're Mike Thomas, you're a vested veteran, you can have the handshake agreement that we've talked about many a times on this podcast, right? Hey, if we let you go, we're going to bring you back. Here's what we're doing. So that's easy. But to me, what it says, and we both had Trent Irwin in our 6, 6 receivers because we had 6 making it. I think Irwin's behind a guy like Stanley Morgan. I think that's what it tells me. And whether they plan on bringing Irwin back to the practice squad or just bringing him back to the 53-man roster in a couple days here, after they make the procedural moves, if he clears waivers, that's to be determined. But I think that part is kind of interesting because, yeah, your 5th guy right now, and this won't be the case when they open the season against the Vikings, but your 5th guy is Stanley Morgan, who's not a really, he is a receiver. You don't consider him a receiver. You look at him as a special teamer, and that's why he's here, right? So that part of it was surprising. But like you said, I think there are a bunch of more moves coming, and we'll get to the practice squad, which was obviously filled with moves and filled with interesting stuff as well.
And I feel like this year compared to last year, I was much more accurate in the guys I thought would make the practice squad. I was a lot closer this year than last year, so I'm patting myself on the back a little bit, as I apparently do when I get things right. I've noticed this is a habit of mine. Let's talk about the Bengals that were waived, that were claimed elsewhere first. Michael Jordan claimed by the Carolina Panthers, and Austin Seibert, in a twist of irony, claimed by the Detroit Lions, and the Lions do so after cutting former Bengals kicker Randy Bullock. So one kicker from Cincinnati gone from Detroit, another kicker from Cincinnati replaces him, James.
Yeah, what are the odds, right? That we're talking about a guy like Seibert, who was kind of pushed out in Cleveland, to say the least, from the moment he was drafted. And now he's joining or not joining, but replacing a guy that we wanted to push out, and a lot of Bengals fans wanted to push out from the moment he made the team over a drafted kicker in Randy Bullock. Look, Seibert, I think, is one of the 32 best kickers. I'm not shocked at all that he got claimed. I wanted him to be traded, right? And unfortunately, they did not get that done. As far as Michael Jordan, I got to be honest with you. This is the worst landing spot for him. A 6'6" guy named Michael Jordan going to North Carolina. I mean, that's brutal. That's awful. I can't believe he went there. You know where I thought he was going to end up? And I mentioned it a couple days ago. Jacksonville. They're the number one waiver priority. And instead, what they do is they say, oh, well, we're going to go get Tyron Johnson, the speedster. And then I assume that same round of waivers, Michael Jordan gets claimed by Carolina. So look, Mike, that name, go by Mike Jordan. Because you're in Carolina now. You say your name's Michael Jordan, you're either going to get laughed out of the room or you better become an all-pro.
I feel like there's probably a lot of guys named Michael Jordan in North Carolina, to be fair. A lot of Jordans probably named their kid Mike. Fun fact, I actually worked with a guy named Mike Jordan for a while. And he's no longer with the company that I work for. But
Did you work for the Wizards? Was it like
Nope.
early 2000s?
No.
Maybe you worked for the
Crazy,
Charlotte
right?
Bobcats? Hornets?
I did. Yep, that's the one. You got it. Nailed it. Let's talk about the couple guys the Bengals claimed on waivers. And these are guys that might be active early in the season, but I have a hard time seeing them as long-term fixtures on this team unless they really impress early. Nick McLeod, an undrafted free agent from Notre Dame. He played for Buffalo this preseason. He was an outside corner for them. He intercepted Andy Dalton in the preseason after a receiver fell down and did not have a very good preseason week 3, according to PFF. The other waiver claim for the Bengals, Wyatt Ray, an edge rusher. He initially joined the league from Boston College as an undrafted free agent with Cleveland, spent this preseason with Tennessee. One interesting note on Ray, John Ledyard, who now covers the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, at the time was writing for the Draft Network, compared his film to early film from Josh Allen, the UK pass rusher, who obviously developed quite a bit from the film that was compared here and is a better athlete than Wyatt Ray is. But Ray did have some preseason success this year, having a preseason week 1 that in some ways rivaled Joseph Osai from a productivity perspective. So those are the two guys that the Bengals claim. I imagine that they will be pushing to play early because the moves we're expecting to see later, and this could be later today. James and I are recording a little bit early. It's 3:40 Eastern time right now. And we could see Trey Waynes and Khalid Kareem put on that short-term IR to make room for these guys as soon as 4 p.m. on Wednesday.
Yep. Yeah, I could certainly see that happening. It's obvious. And yeah, I was a little surprised that we didn't see some of the guys that we talked about because it felt like there was a ton of talent. And I think that's the thing is teams, the way they view it, they may say, oh, we're okay here in the Bengals specifically. We're okay in these areas. But look, we need an edge. We need a corner. And what guys can get us just for a couple weeks can be the Band-Aid until we get back and we can make things work then. And that's probably how they viewed it. And that's why you're seeing these guys, two guys that we didn't discuss at all, get claimed by the Bengals. And a lot of the guys we talked about haven't gotten claimed and they're on practice squads.
In fact, zero players except for Tyron Johnson, I believe,
my guy,
were claimed out of all the guys we talked about yesterday. A guy that I think expected to be a popular waiver claim. It goes with that first waiver priority, as you mentioned, James, to Jacksonville. Coming up next, let's talk about the Bengals who were not claimed on waivers and the composition of the initial practice squad featuring 3 running backs. Coming up next.
Football season is back, and let's make the most of it with a better way to create your custom pool at RunYourPool.com, the premier sports pool hosting service. RunYourPool makes it ridiculously easy to run a football pool with friends, family, or office mates, which I need because I'm social. But guess what? I don't want the responsibility of running it. Well, Run the Pool can help you. They offer dozens of formats, including Survivor, Pick'em, Squares, Margin, Confidence Pools, 33, and more. Run Your Pool hosts formats for NFL and college football, 1 week games, full season playoffs, or the Super Bowl. Check them out today and get $10 off at runyourpool.com/lockedon or use our promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. Anywhere, everywhere in the world, Run Your Pool helps friends and colleagues compete. I'm competitive. I know you are too. So get in on it. The NFL season starts September 9th. Start today at runyourpool.com/lockedon and have your pool up and running in minutes. Again, it's runyourpool.com/lockedon.
James, speaking of survivors and pools and things like that, the Bengals had 15 survivors make it through waivers and onto the practice squad. And I'm a little surprised by some of these names, but a lot of these were guys that I thought were potential practice squatters for this team. Thaddeus Moss, perhaps the most noteworthy, one of the most noteworthy, I would say, as many Bengals fans were upset to see him released. And Joe Burrow may be among those who wasn't happy to see that move. Thaddeus Moss was seen by you, who broke the news, I believe, that Thaddeus Moss was out there at practice, later confirmed by the team to be on the initial practice squad. In addition to Thaddeus Moss, on the offensive side of the ball, they're listed as running backs on the roster, although Puka Williams probably doesn't strictly qualify. Puka Williams, Travion Williams, and Jaquez Patrick, all three clear waivers and make it to the practice squad. The question then becomes, who's the next guy up? And I would say it's between Travion Williams and Jaquez Patrick, depending on who they would be replacing.
That's the key, right? Is who are you replacing? Is it Samaje Perine? Because if so, well, even then you're replacing special team snaps. So maybe it is Travion Williams. I mean, that's the tough part.
Yeah.
Because you would say, oh, well, you need the bruiser, you need Jaquez Patrick. But a Joe Mixon, Chris Evans backfield, as far as carries go and touches, that seems pretty dangerous. And maybe it's a special teams issue. Either way, two different backs, right? In Travion Williams, this, shorter, quicker type back that we know can play. I think he does have talent. And so the fact that they were able to sneak him onto the practice squad is a good thing. And then Jaquez Patrick, as good as he is, I think that NFL teams view these bruising running backs as, oh yeah, we can find that guy when we need to. And that's why he went unclaimed despite a productive preseason. And Puka Williams, man, he's a fan favorite. It's kind of weird. Of all the three, Puka might be the most popular. And I don't really know what his role is going to be in the NFL ever, to be honest with you. But I do think he is talented. So he's a perfect practice squad candidate. So good for him.
Yeah, the good news for the Bengals with Puka is that now they can figure out, are you going to be a receiver? Are you going to be, because he's not going to be a running back, really. Like, if we're being honest, he's just not going to be a running back. Maybe he can line up in the backfield every now and then, but if he's going to stick in the NFL, he'll need to develop, I think, a wide receiver, which is where the Bengals have started working him in, and now he will have time to marinate a little bit on the practice squad. Also on the practice squad, I believe only one offensive lineman, unless I missed something. That's Keaton Sutherland.
That's it.
And we'll see if they bring anyone else in there at some point. Trent Taylor, the veteran who was cut, immediately goes to the practice squad. Not too terribly surprising there. And Mason Schreck, a second tight end. So on the offensive side of the ball, what stands out is one offensive lineman, one receiver, although with the moves today, maybe one of these guys between probably Trent and Irwin, quite frankly, would join Trent Taylor on the practice squad. You could see that happening. And no quarterback at all. I thought maybe Kyle Shermer would be the guy. He had a fine third preseason game, but maybe the Bengals were looking elsewhere, or, and this would shock me, maybe they'll roll with no quarterback on the practice squad at all. I just, in a COVID era, I can't see that.
Maybe they're going after Cam Newton, Jake. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I just wanted to see your face.
What about Ryan Finley, James?
Yeah, that's right. Honestly, though, as a practice squad, that they may be interested in someone like that, right? I don't think Kyle Shermer, he did have a good final game. He was awful against Washington. Didn't think he was that good against Tampa Bay. So we'll see. But yeah, I think they're going to have to get a third quarterback. I mean, in this era, like you said, quarterbacks go like that. Denver last year had to start a receiver. I don't want to see Tyler Boyd taking snaps at quarterback. Sorry, Tyler. I think you're really talented. I don't want to see that, though.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I think they will eventually get a quarterback here. I think this is in flux, though, because clearly the Bengals still have moves coming. By the
For
time we
sure.
finish recording this, we might have some IR moves that have happened and some additional shuffling of the roster.
And I think we will. You know, I think Trey Waynes and, you know, Khalid Kareem are probably going on injured reserve. So let's call the shot now. And it's only 3 weeks. You know, it's not like it's 8 weeks or anything like that. It's 3.
They were both on the rehab field. So before we get to the defensive side of the practice squad and the special teamer that you and I talked about going to the practice squad and showed up there, when they were on the practice field today, really that's the only takeaway. You guys kicked out before anything else happens, and you're dealing with the scramble of the practice squad being announced. We saw Trey Waynes and Khalid Kareem on the rehab field. Did you get a look at all of what they were doing, what kind of work they were doing, or were you unable to see that?
I was able to see a little bit of it, but not a ton, to be honest with you, because we were trying to locate the practice squad members, who was out there, who wasn't. And that was kind of it, right? And to just give you an idea, like Noah Spence, didn't see him out there. He made the practice squad. So not everybody that was on the practice squad was out there. Thad Moss, as you mentioned, stood out. He was out there. No, he was a member of the practice squad. I will say it is a good sign that they're doing that stuff. And maybe today, maybe that was the test. How much can you do? Where are they at? All right, what's the timetable? Maybe today really was, because they were, you know, off back-to-back days, you know, Monday, Tuesday. And so that's it. I mean, that might have been the test that we're going on to see if they're going to put those guys on injured reserve, because we came back in for about a half hour and suddenly you see these guys are released, and Irwin and Thomas, and I'm still down here at Paul Brown Stadium. So wouldn't be shocked at all if that's what happened.
And I assume Irwin and Thomas practiced. Did you notice, were they practicing today?
I did not see them. And the thing is when you're on the 53, you don't think about it. You know, I wasn't looking for Irwin because I was looking for Scotty Washington, who was not out there because he didn't make the practice squad. So that was the part. But yeah, that's a good point, because we didn't notice them, but I wasn't looking for them because they were on the roster. We didn't have any reason to think that they wouldn't be, you know, at that time, which was literally, you know, an hour and a half ago.
Yeah. A lot in flux, to be sure. A lot still moving, but we haven't talked at all about the defensive side of this practice squad, except Noah Spence. Spoiler alert. We'll talk about the rest of the defensive players who made the practice squad, along with the special teamer, and what we're expecting to come next.
It's that time of the year. Football season is back. And if you're looking for a place for over-unders, maybe Joe Burrow prop bets, Joe Mixon prop bets, maybe Jamar Chase prop bets, where his stock dropping a little bit. So maybe you can get some good odds at betonline.ag. You can get all the updated odds, props, and contests, including online's biggest $500,000 NFL mega contest, the world's largest $200,000 NFL survivor contest, both open now at BetOnline. So go to the website right now, sign up today, and when you make that first deposit, use promo code Locked On for a 100% welcome bonus. Plus, with the NFL season just over a week away on September 9th, it's Bucks, it's Cowboys. If you're a new user at betonline.ag, you can make a bet and you can get your money back if you lose. With promo code NFL100, you can get in on their super promo opening day special, where you're going to get refunded up to $25 if you bet on the Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys and you happen to lose. Only at betonline.ag. So get there now. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports.
Today's episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast is also brought to you by rockauto.com. Why choose to spend 30, 50, 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or the car dealership when you can save time and money by visiting rockauto.com, a family business serving do-it-yourselfers like you for over 20 years. Rock Auto's prices are reliably low for all of their customers. They have everything you need, from brake parts and tail lights to motor oil and new carpet. Go explore the easy-to-use website today. Find whatever part your car or truck needs. And when you check out, make sure you write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. James, the remainder of the practice squad that we haven't discussed includes a lot of defensive players. And for me, as I shuffle around to pull up my practice squad predictions, this is where the surprises were. Because I didn't necessarily think that Tony Brown and Keandre Jones specifically would be guys the Bengals wanted to bring back for the practice squad. But Darren Simmons has raved about Tony Brown. Winston Rose is a guy that this team might still see as a developmental playmaker who needs more time and was with the team all of last year, after all. There was a lot of excitement when he came down from the CFL after leading the CFL in interceptions. Keandre Jones was a guy that I didn't think had a terribly exciting preseason, especially when you compare him to Joe Bacci, who made a number of splash plays in coverage. Joe Bacci, by the way, also on the practice squad. So those three guys, Rose, Brown, and Jones, were the surprises for me. And the guys that I had on my list of potential practice squatters that made it to the practice squad, Bacci, Renell Wren, who I think is nice for the team to keep after they invested in his relatively raw talent and athletic upside. Coming off those injuries, he'll get time to continue to build on the practice squad. Noah Spence recently signed, and Trayvon Henderson, who had a really nice preseason at safety and might be hurt. So not sure what's happening there. But those are the defensive players on the practice squad for now, those 7 guys. And what stands out to you when you consider this list of players, James?
Well, you mentioned Keandre Jones. Shocked. Shocked is the word to see him on the practice squad. The other guys like Rose and Brown, not as much. You need corners. And obviously there was some uncertainty corner-wise in general. And you're right. I think Winston Rose is a guy that, they feel like they're developing and is trending in the right direction. It continues to flash a bit. Tony Brown, to me, it's probably because of his special teams value, I would say, his familiarity in the system, and who knows how long he actually does stick on the practice squad. But because he did get beat a decent amount. I mean, in practice and in games, part of the reason why on this field right in front of me, if you're watching on YouTube, they blew that lead to the Dolphins. Tony Brown was out there. He was part of that for sure. And so that was a surprise. Bacci, I thought played well. I'm glad they were able to sneak him onto the practice squad. I think he's someone that can contribute. You're going to have injuries at linebacker. And that's kind of the thing, is like, he's clearly, to me, well ahead of Jones. So I think Jones is kind of buried. And even if there's an injury, even 2, I don't know if Jones would get promoted, and it might be, Bacci and then somebody else that on another practice squad across the league.
These could all be a bunch of Darren Simmons specials too. You look at a lot of these guys can contribute and would contribute on special teams if they were on the roster. I mean, the corners, both linebackers potentially, Trent Taylor as a returner, Travion Williams, obviously a special teamer, Mason Schreck, one of their special team contributors at a tight end. And another special teams contributor who is on the practice squad, James, you thought there might be a punting competition before Drew Chrisman was hurt. Instead, he doesn't kick at all in the preseason. They kind of hide him a little bit, get him onto the practice squad. And it is a little interesting to see a punter on the practice squad. I do have to say, if you're going to pick a specialist, I would actually expect it to be a kicker, because again, in a COVID era, if something were to go wrong, and Evan McPherson had to miss a week because he was a close contact or whatever at the wrong time, well, then who's kicking? There's nobody else. But instead, it's Drew Chrisman, who, I guess the same thing would apply to punters. Who's punting, if not Kevin Huber? And Drew Chrisman will be on the practice squad.
I love this because he's punter P1 of the future. It's not there yet, right? QB1, he's P1. And I think 2022 is going to be Drew Chrisman's year. I told you I wouldn't have kicked him or let him punt at all, rather, on Sunday against the Dolphins. And he was suited up, and I'm like, oh, are they really going to make this mistake? And I don't know how good he is, honestly. I think he was really good at Ohio State. The talent's there. He's looked good in practice. And so you don't want that guy to get away. And so the fact that they were able to get him back, I think that's a major win, because a year from now, Jake, we could be talking about the Bengals kicking game, the long term, being Evan McPherson, Drew Chrisman, and just 2 guys that can be those, your staples, on special teams for the next decade, right? Like that's And I think that's a realistic thing. I don't think that's crazy to think when it comes to Drew Chrisman and his abilities. And we've obviously seen front and center what Evan McPherson can do. So I think that was a big win for Darren Simmons, and he was probably excited that they were able to sneak the Cincinnati native, by the way, in Chrisman onto the practice squad.
There must always be a punter from Cincinnati.
Yeah, baby.
In Cincinnati.
Yeah, baby.
That seems to be the rule. The other staple, by the way, James, would be Clark Harris, who's going to play until he's, 66, 67, would you say?
He's on that TB12 diet. So, yeah, at least 67.
Oh, man, your love for Tom Brady is fantastic. Let's recap, James. The practice squad, not a ton of surprises. The cuts today were surprising, but we'll see how that shakes out. After we record, I'm sure we'll see some additional moves, or maybe we won't find out until tomorrow. But I think that both of us are expecting potentially at least one, if not two players in Trey Waynes and Khalid Kareem, with the players the Bengals claimed on waivers, to head to the IR. We'll see if any of these other guys that went unclaimed on waivers come up, as there will be a second round. There are cuts happening today across the league as waiver claims are fulfilled. 27 players waiver claims were granted. So there are 27 players that correspondingly will have to be cut. Maybe these teams will look around the league at practice squads and decide there is somebody that they'd like to poach. And we'll see if the Bengals get in on any of that action. What else, James, am I forgetting? Is there anything we're missing that we need to talk about today before we wrap up a crazy day of moves when the practice squad's filled up?
No, not really. I just, the one thing I would say, and you obviously don't hope anyone's placed on IR. I just hope there aren't any surprises, though. Yeah. Like, we're thinking it's Kareem and we're thinking it's Waynes. Hopefully there's nothing unforeseen that's coming down. So if that's the case, well, that really sucks and could be awful. I don't think so, though. But yeah, quarterback, I expect a move. I think we'll hear something pretty quickly. I would be, and again, maybe it is Shermer and they're letting the dust settle with all these other guys. And they're saying, hey, Kyle, we're going to sign you to the practice squad. We just need to get this stuff out of the way first. And we need to keep that spot. And, if that's the case, then that's the case. But if they don't have a third quarterback by the end of the week, I'd be pretty surprised.
Yeah, that's a good point. The one open spot on the practice squad, most likely a quarterback, although we'll have to see what shakes out with Trenton Irwin as well, and see if the Bengals want to bring in anyone else from the outside.
And the last thing, I would be shocked if Mike Thomas doesn't come back to the active roster. Yeah. I just tried to process all of camp and preseason. Like, when Burrow throws the receivers, he moves, switches sides to make sure he's throwing to Mike Thomas. So this feels like more of a procedural thing than anything.
And he is a vested veteran, and we've always said if these moves were to happen, it would most likely be a vested veteran like Thomas. Whatever shakes out, we will have you covered with those updates tomorrow as rosters are crystallizing and taking shape. The last note before we close, James, the Bengals don't have to tell us anything about injuries until next Wednesday. The preseason is officially still in session until September 5th, according to the NFL calendar, and so practice reports will not be required until practices begin next week. So we won't get any injury news unless the Bengals willingly decide to tell the media about it until then. And don't count on that. Until next time, Bengals fans, that's going to do it for the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.